Hey there, movie buffs and TV junkies. Welcome to the Drive and Chat podcast, the show where we roll out the red carpet for all things film and television. I'm Gabe Whiteman, and today we're diving deep into Kraven the Hunter. Yeah, that's right, the last Sony Spider-Man related villain movie that somehow got made, and let me tell you, it's something. It's definitely something. So, when I first heard about Kraven the Hunter, I thought it was going to be almost like another typical Sony Marvel movie where filmmakers throw in a bunch of action, snazzy costume if you will, and they add ADR, which for those who don't know what ADR is, it's automated dialogue replacement, where basically they add in almost like a voiceover in post production in case something didn't pick up or and stuff like that. That's what ADR is. And so they add that and maybe add some cheesy dialogue. But I know how Sony Marvel movies get, and they also forget to build a coherent story. And well, I mean, that's the usual formula for Sony Marvel movies, and it turns out I wasn't too far off with my prediction. But here I gotta say though, here's the twist. It wasn't all bad. And honestly, there was actually parts of it I actually enjoyed, especially in some of the action sequences too. They were actually pretty good, but I don't want to talk about it too much until the actual review. So in this episode, I'm going to dive into the good, the weird, and the downright questionable choices in Kraven the Hunter, and by the end, I'll give you my final score. Spoiler alert: it's actually not as low as you might expect, but I can already spoil you right now. It's definitely not a 10 out of 10. There will never be a Sony Spider-Man movie or Spider-Man related movie that will get a 10 out of 10. But also, wait until the end of the episode because I'm going to rank all of the Sony Marvel movies from best to worst. So stay tuned to the end of the episode for that. But before we jump in, I actually have to announce the winner of the Christmas giveaway. So there has been some things. I know I said that the Christmas giveaway was supposed to be, the winner was supposed to be announced at the on the 16th, but if you're listening to this, it's actually the December 20th. So it has been a couple, or not, it's not the 20th, sorry. It is when you listen to this, it's actually the 27th. So I know it's been very, very past due, but I've just been trying to spend time with family and I've been doing Christmas related things. So sorry about the wait, but before I actually announce who the winner is, I do have to thank everyone that entered. I really do, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate all the support for the podcast. It means a lot. This is the second time, or technically the third time, I'm trying to do a movie critic thing. So I'm doing it differently this time. So I'm glad everybody entered the giveaway and is supporting the podcast. So it really means a lot. But now, the winner of the Christmas giveaway is Ricardo Bravo. Congratulations to Ricardo Bravo for winning the Christmas giveaway. Not only that, but Ricardo is actually a good friend of mine, and he's a rapper, producer, and songwriter that goes by the name Controversy the One. He is coming out with a collab album called CANDELA with Portland Community College student Oscar Nieves, aka Kllejero. They just dropped a music video for the hit song from CANDELA titled Just Dance that I will actually link below. Go check them out by watching the trailer and checking out their website that they have for the album, and hopefully you get as hyped as I am for their upcoming album. It's going to be a really good one, so go check it out. It's linked in the podcast description below. Lastly, don't forget about the Drive and Chat Award Show episode that will premiere on December 31st. It will be styled after the Oscars and give awards in the shape of custom trophies to specific nominated movies of 2024. And this will be the last episode of Season 1 of the Drive and Chat podcast. Stay tuned for Season 2 because there will be a tease of what's to come in Season 2 at the Drive and Chat Awards. Don't miss out on the Drive and Chat Awards on December 31st. Now, let's get on into the review. Okay, so here is the plot summary of the movie. Kraven the Hunter follows Sergei Kravenov, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, a skilled big game hunter who is given a mysterious serum after a near-fatal injury. The serum grants Sergei enhanced abilities, including animal-like strength and senses. Seeking to uncover the truth about his powers and the twisted motives of his father, Nikolai Kravenov, played by Russell Crowe, Kraven becomes a vigilante hunting criminals instead of animals. Along the way, he faces various foes, including the dangerous Rhino, played by Alessandro Nivola, and the mysterious villain, the Stranger, played by Christopher Abbott, while grappling with his complicated relationships with his father and brother, Dmitri, played by Fred Heschinger. Okay, so now that we're done with the plot summary, let's actually talk what I thought about the movie. So first, let's talk about the technical and artistic choices, which is the visual and the cinematography. So overall, I don't know. At least in my opinion, I think the visuals and the cinematography wasn't too bad. There was definitely some standout shots. There are some striking visuals, like the scene where Kraven runs through the winter desert. Actually, you can actually go to YouTube because they actually posted the first 8 minutes, 10 minutes. They posted like the first like part of the movie. It's not that long, but the first part of the movie, and it has that shot of Kraven running through the winter desert because he's escaping from prison. That was actually a really cool shot. I think that was a very, very cool shot, and I have to give I have to give props to the director and the cinematographer. That was actually a really cool shot. It shows like the atmosphere and it shows like the winter landscape, and it was really cool. So it did have some good shots. I think I gotta be honest, there wasn't really any more standout shots. If I'm being completely honest, there wasn't any more like shots I was like, wow, I have to write this down, or wow, man, that was really good. Like, not really. Like there was maybe the ending of how the movie ended, but I gotta be honest, I wasn't even particularly I guess impressed of the ending, so I'm not gonna talk about that. But other than that, the visuals and cinematography was like just okay. There was definitely some inconsistency. There were some shots that looks great and captures like the gritty tone, while others do feel a little bit generic or underwhelming. The film does have its moments, but it doesn't maintain that visual excellence throughout. Like I think the cinematography and the visuals started out great, and the intro, and even I gotta even admit the movie actually started out good in the beginning of the movie. After that prison breakout scene, I think it kind of went downhill. But besides the point, the visuals and the cinematography kind of just there wasn't anything that stood out. Everything kind of just quote unquote blended together, and there was not really any shots that actually I thought were actually good, or not good, but nothing that just stood out. So I think there was some inconsistency. So overall, the while the shots weren't, I guess, quote unquote revolutionary, the cinematography does enough to highlight the brutality and the savagery of Craven's world, but it doesn't like go over the top. And I don't know why Sony hasn't changed the formula. I don't know why Sony keeps doing it the way they are, because they really need to change something. I mean, you gotta you have to remember this is officially the last movie of the SSU, or the last movie that Sony will make that is Marvel related in a while. But I don't know. I feel like they should have done better, especially with this being the last one. They should have done something better. But overall, the cinematography does its job, but there's no standout shots. They weren't trying to excel in the category. So next, let's move on to the action and the gore. So I do want to talk about this for a good minute, because I gotta admit the action and the gore for Kraven the Hunter was actually pretty good. I gotta admit, if there was anything that they were trying to excel in, or to succeed in, it was definitely the violence. They nailed the violence. Like one of the highlights of the film is the action and just how bloody and brutal it is. It's so good. It leans into like a bloody and gory style, and they don't hold back. I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's rated R. So it was actually really good. Craven's I guess you can probably say the director was responsible, but the director's choices for Craven's methods of taking down his foes are graphic and intense, and the film doesn't shy away from showing the violence at all. Like, there is a scene in the movie where Craven is, I'll try not to spoil too much, but he's standing in front of a truck full of people that are trying to pass him because they're up to no good and he's trying to, kill him. Well, of course, he's just a man. They don't think any of him, and so they just move on. They quote unquote run him over, but they don't. And so it ends up leading into this big car fight, and that is actually one of the shots you do see in the trailer is Kraven ripping off this guy's nose. That that was actually a really good scene. The fact that he does that is good. I gotta say, some of tying back into the visuals and the cinematography, that's where sometimes it does kind of, I guess, become weak. Is sometimes the blood, of course, okay, obviously, I have to put this out there. The blood is fake. It's so obvious that the blood is fake. But sometimes there's shots that it's way too obvious that the blood is fake. So it does get like like it's at sometimes where it's like, okay, dude, it's so obvious that this is computer generated or you're using ketchup. Something like that. I don't know. Anyways, but going back into the action and the gore, it was really good. There's shots like that. There was even a couple of shots towards the end of the movie where he uses bear traps against people. So the bear traps actually goes around the person's head. Which is another shot from the trailer. It's a really good scene. There's a lot of good moments of action that I was actually looking back at it. I'm actually impressed of. There was some impactful moments like the action sequences. The action sequences stand out more than the story itself at times. So, which I guess is both a good thing and a bad thing. I know I know that I think they were kind of marketing the movie for this as to being action and being action heavy, brutal heavy. It's going to be bloody. Prepare for like the bloodiest movie of your life, blah, blah, blah. So I know that they were trying to, market the movie after that. But it does stand out more than the story itself, which isn't good. I know this is like filmmaking 101 for anybody that wants to make a movie. If you want to make a movie, the story is like your foundation. If your story's not good, and since it's the foundation, it's gonna make your movie wobbly and it's gonna be unstable and no one's gonna like it. And that's what was part of the problem with this movie is the story was just kind of subpar, I gotta say. But the violence is one of the most consistent elements in terms of entertainment value. They nailed it. They didn't. There wasn't actually one spot of the movie where I was like, "Wow, okay, this action sucks." No, that there was none of that. All the action that I saw was really good. I liked it. I wouldn't say it's like as good as like the action in I don't know like Spider-Verse or any of the other Sony Marvel movies that are actually successful, but I gotta admit, the action and the violence and everything are was really good and was really consistent across the bar. So I gotta give him a round of applause for that. Now moving on to characters and acting. So with characters and acting, I did want to mention this because I think I like the actors. I do. However, that was one of the problems with this movie was that I think they kind of almost wasted the cast. They had a really good cast. They had Aaron Taylor Johnson, they had Russell Crowe, they had Ariana DeBois, they had Fred Hetchinger, and then they had a couple more people that stood out. Like they had a good cast, but they just wasted them with the characters in the script, and I think that was the problem. But I'll talk about that later. But what I want to talk about is Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven. I think he honestly he brings physicality to the role and does well portraying Kraven's internal conflict. I think he does a really good job portraying him. My one problem I did have with this movie when it comes to Aaron Taylor Johnson playing Kraven is one, I don't think Aaron Taylor Johnson really, I guess you could say, matched that look of Kraven. Because you have to think about this too. Earlier this year? No, last year. Earlier last year, they came out with Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac on PS5. And that story had Kraven in it as well. And that Kraven was 1,000 times better than the Kraven that we got in the movie. 1,000 times better. And he actually looks like Kraven. Whereas if you look at Aaron Taylor Johnson, it's more like they like if I'm being realistic right now, Ryan Gosling could have been Kraven the Hunter. It was at that level where like they just got somebody that had, a good body and they called it a day. And that does bug me a little bit. Not as much as my main complaint for Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven. My main complaint is the accents. You have to remember, Kraven the Hunter's name is Sergei Kravenov. He is supposed to be Russian, but do I hear a Russian accent in his voice? No. Do I hear a Russian accent in Russell Crowe's voice, who plays Kraven's father? Yes. So why doesn't Aaron Taylor Johnson have a Russian accent for his character? He does like speak Russian in like the beginning of the movie, but that's it. That's it. That's the only Russian you see. And it's like, really? I don't know. But yet in Spider-Man and in I cannot speak. In Insomniac Spider-Man 2 game, and with that version of Kraven, he had a Russian accent throughout the entire game. He was Russian. That was Kraven. And yet Aaron Taylor Johnson didn't have a Russian accent. That really bothered me, especially since Russell Crowe had a Russian accent with the character. If Russell Crowe didn't have a Russian accent with his character, I wouldn't be as upset about this, or it wouldn't be as of a big a critique. But since he did, I'm kind of that's major points down. I didn't like that. He should have had a Russian accent, and they missed it. But going back to Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven, he did. Besides that, he did a good job with Kraven. I think he did a good job with the action. He did a good job with the stunts. His acting was good when interacting with other characters, especially when it comes to facing his father and his brother, because those dynamics were different, to say the least. But other than that, Aaron Taylor Johnson was actually really good. Moving on to Russell Crowe's performance, I don't know about anybody else, but I liked Russell Crowe. I really liked him. Crowe's portrayal of Kraven's father, Nikolai, is a standout. He nails like the classic, like cold, uncaring father stereotype, archetype, whatever you want to call it. He does a good job. I think when I look at reviews of Kraven the Hunter, that is one thing I think is underrated is Russell Crowe's performance. I think he did a good job. I'm not saying like that is like the best film of his career or anything, but it was definitely good, especially considering this is a Sony Marvel movie. I think it was better than most, and that is what I want to make sure to get across to people, is that I think his performance was better than most. So, than most of these Sony Marvel movies, and than what people think. So I think he did a good job. He really played that powerful father type, because at the end of the day, his character is supposed to be this father that is trying to, I guess, prepare his sons for the real world, and that it's not sunshines and rainbows. Like, stuff happens. The world is not nice. It's dirty, and it will eat you and puke you out if it has to. So, and he's kind of like that father type that prepares you for it, but not in the best way, considering he also runs a mafia style crew thing going on. So he basically has blood money, and so it doesn't really he's that type of stereotype. So considering what he had to do with his character and what he had to do, especially during the scene when Kraven got his powers, I think he did a good job. I think he did a good performance. And then I'm not going to go through like everybody on the list, but I do want to mention characters like Calypso, which is played by Ariana DeBois, and Dimitri, which is played by Fred Hetchinger. I do want to mention those because they were like, I guess you can say, main characters. I guess Calypso was in a way, but at the end of the day, they were supporting cast. But the main thing I want to talk about them was that I think those characters felt underdeveloped or like inconsistent in their motivations. So it's not a big spoiler um, because it's been said over tons and tons of videos, and it's even in the comics. So if you don't want to hear this, go watch the film and then come back. But basically, Dimitri, which is Sergei's or Kraven's brother, he has this weak son personality, or this weak's. He basically plays a weak son in the eyes of the father. So he's kind of like overshadowed by Kraven, because Kraven is kind of in his glory and is his father's best son, quote unquote, and stuff like that. And so it really puts Dimitri down. But he plays that character. It's that type of character throughout the entire movie. And then in the last 10 seconds of the movie, Dimitri switches to a villain, and he's officially called the Chameleon. And you'll find out once you see the movie and his scene, you'll find out why he's called the Chameleon. But yeah, he just turns and he switches to this villain, and it's like, what? Like, I mean, was it predictable? Like, did I predict that he would eventually turn evil? Yes. Especially with how his character was turning up. Yes, I can see that. However, I don't know. I just feel like it was very abrupt. It was like, I'm good, I'm good. You know what? I'm going to be evil for the rest of my life. And that was it. It's like, really? Okay, that was a switch. And then with the character Calypso, she plays a lawyer in the movie, and I gotta say, her her character resembling a lawyer is very, very questionable. It's questionable at best. She doesn't really play a lawyer. She plays a businesswoman. I could see her if you just classified her as a businesswoman. Yeah, I can see that. But a lawyer? No. She doesn't act like a lawyer at all. She actually does some deals with some very, very sketchy, dark guys in the movie, and she really doesn't act like a lawyer at all. She actually says she's the DA, but she's not. She doesn't act like it at all. I don't know what they were trying to go for, but obviously they did not. They haven't. I guess like the crew or the staff that is making this movie has never seen a episode of Law and Order at all, because yeah, she did not. I did not get the notion or the idea of that she's playing a lawyer. There's no way. So that's what I have to say about actors and the acting and everything. Moving on to pacing and structure, though, I gotta say, I think that is another big part of the movie, is the pacing and structure. I think that's what kind of also, I guess you could say, kill the movie. Um, the movie does have a slow start. I'll just throw that out right now. It has a slow start. The movie struggles with pacing, especially in the first half. The first half is a lot of exposition. It's just all exposition. There's no plot. There's no like this leading to this leading to this. Like there's not that type of story structure. It's literally just establishing Kraven, how he got his powers, his dynamic with his brother and father, and how he came to be now. And then that takes up the first half, literally like an hour and 15 of the movie. It literally takes up so much of the movie, and it drags so much, and it really leaves the plot like feeling almost stalled until halfway through. And it's true. It is. I saw a couple of different reviews saying that, and I was like, you know what? I'll ignore it. I'm trying to see this movie with a open perspective. And when I saw that movie, they were completely right. Yeah, this movie has no plot in the first half of the movie. It's almost like it's almost like if Kraven would had a YouTube account and he posted a day in the life of Kraven. That would be the first half of the movie. It's literally just him being Kraven, showing the dynamic with his family, how he got his powers, and that's it. And it was like, I don't know. And it was like, at best. And that was the problem. So I didn't really care for that too much. But with moving on to story development, though, once the movie finally starts to unfold, it does pick up speed. But again, like I said, the first hour is just mostly setting up things of just that doesn't really have a lot of payoff at the very end of the movie. So it drags so much in the first half, where once plot starts to actually build and starts to starts building and actually starts presenting itself and starts showing towards like the second half of the movie, it's almost like, okay, well, that's it, really? It's like, okay. And especially, I have to actually, once I'm done with my review, I have to tell you the end of what my reaction was to the end of the movie, because yeah, it was something. But overall, the story development was just like, yeah, it didn't develop properly, and there was some confusion with some subplots. I gotta admit, the introduction of characters like the Stranger. So the Stranger is I. So if you don't know who the Stranger is, the Stranger is a character that I don't even know. I'm a Marvel buff, and even I don't know him. And so basically, I won't reveal what his powers are, but he's this guy that plays a villain, I guess you could say. I don't know what he is, but I you can't make this up. This the Stranger, the alias that he goes by, he shows up literally, I can't even make this up, an hour and 30 minutes into the movie. And I might be off by on that time, but he shows up literally an hour, between an hour and hour 30 into the movie. Like, dude, really? And he's like, "Oh, hey." And he keeps like showing up here and there, and then it gets revealed that he has a vengeance towards Kraven, I think. And it felt too late. It's so late into the movie, and by this time it already established Rhino's character. It's like they wanted to add in another villain into the movie, but it had nothing to do with it. Literally, and I have to tell you this right now. If they took out his character right now and it was just the Rhino as the main villain, it would not make the story any different. He literally did not, the Stranger did not make any profound, you know, he didn't make an impact on the movie at all. And I hate that. I hate when movies don't, when they want to, I hate when movies want to add characters, but they don't know when. So then they add them, and then that goes terribly, and they don't do anything. And then the writers in the writer room basically forget about the character until it's on the screen, and it's like, wow, he didn't show up until the last 10 minutes. It's like, really? Okay. So at the end of the day, the Stranger felt too late. He didn't need to be in this movie at all, and the roles often left audiences scratching their heads. I don't know if I'm the only one that feels like that, but I didn't like the character to begin with. I liked his powers, but how they introduced him, how he's related to the story, and how he I guess shapes up to be towards the rest of the movie is terrible. And he barely has any screen time. He has like maybe 5 minutes of screen time. It's stupid. But next, let's talk about CGI and visual effects. So with this, there, I gotta admit, I think there will. I have seen stuff online, and I think they are too harsh about this movie. I think I think this movie has some solid effects. Some of the CGI, particularly the lion. So there's a scene where it shows Craven getting his powers, and or how he got his powers, and how he got this animalistic powers and connection and everything, and it involves him going on a hunt with his father and his brother, and where they hunt a lion, and that was part of the movie, and and the lion shows up, of course, and of course attacks him, and that starts his how he got his powers and blah blah blah. The lion, I think, was actually pretty good. I saw some things online that showed the lion. I don't think it was that bad. There's a lot more people that really just say like, "Oh my gosh, this is the worst CGI. Oh my gosh, I've seen better lions than that." Blah blah blah. I don't think it was that bad. Okay, I gotta admit though, there was there was some bad CGI though. That was related to the lion, but not the lion himself. The lion looked great, and it did actually help elevate Craven's animalistic qualities. It's effective in showcasing his enhanced abilities and his powers overall. So I think they did a good job with the CGI on the lion. However, the CGI that I was talking about that was bad was the drop of blood that was coming from the lion. So part of his origin story is that the lion does actually grab Craven and basically kills him, or almost, actually no, technically yeah, he kills him, and and then he, of course, the lion's teeth sinks into Craven's body, blah blah blah. And he basically gets like really his body's messed up from the lion and everything. Like, he really attacked him. But there is a blood or drop of blood that the camera shows that comes from the lion's tooth and gets into one of Kraven's wounds, and that is part of how he got his powers. Not the whole reason. There's a lot of people that are not telling the whole entire story of how he got his powers. Everybody thinks it's from this drop of blood and is from this radioactive lion. It isn't. The lion isn't radioactive, and the drop of blood that came from the lion isn't the sole reason why he got his powers. But anyways, the point is that the drop of blood that came from the lion, oh my gosh, talk about the worst possible CGI. That was terrible. That was like if they tried to make a drop of blood on like Windows 8 or something like that. It was so terrible. That drop of blood couldn't have been so much more obvious that it was computer generated. That was like the worst. Like, I've seen some bad CGI in movies. That is probably the top of the top. That was so bad. That was so bad. It was so poorly done, and it felt out of place in an otherwise visually ambitious film. Like, it was so bad, especially since they showed the lion. The lion was all CGI, and the lion looked good, but yet they couldn't, simulate a drop of blood. That's that's a disappointment right there. And then we have to talk about the Rhino CGI. We have to talk about it. The Rhino's introduction is, I gotta admit, a letdown. It really is. His appearance feels like almost like incomplete and like lacking like the impact that a character should have. Like, he is throughout the entire movie. I'll say that right now. He is throughout the entire movie. Not as the Rhino, but as Alexei, he is through the entire movie. And he doesn't make a good impact on the story. He has motive. I'll give him that. I'll give the character that. The character does have motive. However, it is not good motive. It's more like, oh hey, I hate your father, and I'm basically gonna carry this grudge over 20 years later, even though your father doesn't remember me now. And yeah, it's so stupid. And then the way that he turns into Rhino is interesting. It is interesting, but the way he looks as the full Rhino is terrible. It's terrible. I think this officially marks the wall, the brick wall that basically should say that Rhino shouldn't be in any more Marvel movies or Marvel films projects, period. I like the Rhino. He's a very interesting Spider-Man villain. However, the Rhino has been done countless times, and every time he always doesn't look good. The only time he actually looks good is when the Rhino is this big, 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 beefy dude that's wearing this metal suit that gives him an appearance as the Rhino. That is the only way that Rhino will look sort of good. But as a actual Rhino with actual like Rhino scaly skin, no, it looks terrible. So yeah, so overall, the Rhino CGI was not really good. I wouldn't say it's terrible. There's some people that said it was like god awful, that shouldn't have been in any movie, period. So I don't think it was that bad, but it was bad though. Not as bad as the drop of blood that starts Kraven's origin story and how he got his powers. That was terrible. But the Rhino CGI could have been better. Lastly, I do want to talk about the villains and the story. So, the villains and the story, this is like basically the biggest thing I want to talk about, because this is like the biggest thing that really just killed the movie for me. So first, let's talk about the Rhino and the Stranger. I know I kind of already talked about it, but I kind of want to just basically clear the air and basically let you know my full thoughts on Rhino and the Stranger. The film introduces some strange and underwhelming villains. The Rhino CGI is mediocre at best. Like, it's not like bad, but it's bad / mediocre. It's like on that line. It's like, wow, that kind of, I expected better. And the Rhino's arc just feels rushed. It doesn't feel like satisfying or anything. It's like, oh hey, I'm going to basically stand in front of a glass window for 2 hours until you need me, and then I'll turn into a rhino and have this big fight that basically means nothing. Yeah. And then there was this villain called the Stranger that arrives like an hour into the movie, even though he should have been introduced like literally an hour before that. And his role just feels forced, and it's just so confusing given how late he enters into the plot. Like his character is not needed. If you took him out of the movie, he doesn't need to be in there. It wouldn't change the movie at all. He literally does not make any impact on the movie at all. There was something that did happen towards the end of the movie that does connect this movie to the Spider-Man universe. However, it's not like a big connection. It's more like, oh hey, I think that's kind of related to Spider-Man, and then that's it. It's okay. It was like, okay, whatever. So he should have been taken out. It was so forced. And then next with the story issues, the film's plot itself doesn't really like start to shape until much later. Like I said earlier, which hurts the overall pacing. Kraven's personal journey is just at odds with the erratic nature of the villain's subplots, which does leave some story threads feeling unresolved or unnecessary. So there was a lot of like almost subplots that they did do. I guess you can call them subplots, but yeah, they just felt so unnecessary and like, okay, you're more like just sitting there and waiting for the subplot to be done so then it can get onto the actual movie. And that's what it felt like, and I didn't like that. And then lastly, Calypso, the character. The character Calypso doesn't really, I would, I guess you could say, didn't really quite work. Her backstory as a lawyer is poorly explained and poorly executed. I couldn't, if like, I couldn't even tell you that she was a lawyer. Like, if she never mentioned in the movie that she was DA, I couldn't even tell you what her job was. Couldn't even tell you. And she just seems more involved in the black market than in legal affairs. And I'm not even kidding. There's an actual plot device or a plot piece that involves her making trades with some shady people that seem like the black market, and she's more involved with that stuff than in actual legal stuff. You you never see her actually work as an actual lawyer. You never see her like, oh hey, I'm gonna work on a case, blah blah blah. Like no, you never even hear her say the word legal or case in the movie at all. She was the worst lawyer ever. Worst lawyer ever. And the story of how she became a lawyer was also not did not make sense. I think her parents were lawyers or something like that, but or I think one of them was, I don't know. It didn't make any sense. But that was basically everything I thought about the movie. So, overall, I think this movie was it was something. It was definitely something, but I think it could have been a lot better. Was it better than some other Sony Marvel movies? In my opinion, yes. But I think it could have been a lot better. So yeah, that's what I thought about it, and I guess let's wrap this up. Okay, so let's wrap this up. So these are like my final thoughts of basically everything that I thought about Kraven the Hunter. So, Kraven the Hunter is, in a way and in a word, disjointed. There are moments that are like really cool. The action and the blood and some of the characters were actually really cool, but like the movie feels like it's just trying to do too much at once. The first hour is spent setting up things up, and just by the time we finally get into like the meat of the story, it's kind of a mess. The CGI for the Rhino was not mediocre at best, and was actually it was almost like borderline bad. It's almost that way. So it was not good at all, and the way they introduced him was laughable. It was. He was. I can't even make this up. He was literally one of those villains where they stand and they are just in a room the entire movie, and they're like, you know what, this is my time to make my grand entrance and turn into the Rhino, and then yeah, it's laughable. And don't even get me started on the whole subplot with the Stranger. That guy popped in out of nowhere and felt completely unnecessary. It was he didn't even need to be in that movie. That is probably by far one of, if not the worst villains. That is actually the worst villain of the entire movie. He did not need to be in this movie at all. But here's the thing. I think people are hating on this movie way too much. I think they really are. I think I saw so many reviews saying, "Oh my gosh, this movie's bad, blah blah blah. Oh my gosh, I don't like this movie." There's even some sources that I trust when it comes to movie reviews, and even they said it was bad. But then I was like, you know what? I'm a movie critic. I still want to go see it. I think I liked it better than most, and I think people are hating on it way too much. Is it perfect? No, not at all. Could it have been a lot better? Oh, 100%, absolutely. But is it a complete disaster? No, not really. I don't think so. For the last film of the Sony Spider-Man Universe, I was expecting something more polished, but it is not the worst thing I've ever seen. So, in the end, my final score for this movie is a 6 out of 10. It is a decent entry into the world of anti-heroes and Spider-Man villains, but all I'll say is just don't expect it to be anything groundbreaking at all. Okay, so before we actually wrap up this episode, I actually want to do something fun. I'm going to rank all of the Sony Marvel movies, since it actually has been reported that Kraven the Hunter is the last SSU movie. So, without further ado, let's get on with the ranking. So there's 6 movies in total, so I will go from worst to best. So at number 6, I gotta give it to Madam Web. Madam Web at number 6, I think, was well deserved. I expected a lot from this movie, considering that it was described as like the Spider-Man meets Terminator. I heard that phrase. Who did I hear? Oh, from Emma Roberts. Emma Roberts went on and said like, "Hey, I'm in this movie. Um, all I will say about this movie is that it's almost like Terminator meets Spider-Man, where it involves some like future stuff." And I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. And then I watched it, and that's where things just went wrong because I didn't watch it. I sat through it. It felt like I sat through it. It had terrible ADR. I Seriously, it had terrible ADR. The half like most of the time it felt like it was somebody completely different and it didn't sound like the same actor. It was completely terrible and it was so obvious that it was ADR. The villain sucked. I hated the villain because like his suit was I think his suit was kind of cool. But him as a villain, no. I mean, he's worried about is that these girls are going to kill him in the future, which like okay, I get like the premise of the movie I get, I think is actually kind of cool, but how they executed it and how he's doing it and the villain, it was like, okay, this sucks. He's not interesting at all. And there was like just a lot of cheesy dialogue. There was so much cheesy dialogue. So much. It sucked ass. So, this is probably the first Marvel movie that I will never watch ever again. This movie sucked. Like that this is probably that would probably be like the first movie I would ever give like a 3 out of 10 for. That sucked. So at number 6 was Madam Web. At number 5 is Morbius. With this movie, with Morbius, I thought I was going to like it since it was like a Marvel villain that's a vampire. I was actually looking forward to this movie. I thought this was going to be a good movie. However, when I did watch it, it was messy and it was obvious that it was heavily edited. It was so heavily edited. It was like to the point where the plot was rushing too fast. It really was. And yeah, it was very obvious that it was heavily edited. However, this is a little bit of a hot take alert, but I thought the CGI was good when it came to the vampire look. I liked when Jared Leto and the other cast turned into vampires. I liked them. It had that vampire look, and I liked it, especially when they moved and it had like that misty, like dusty trail behind them when they moved. I liked it. People complained that it looked messy because of it, but I like that. I think that was first off, that was on purpose. They didn't do it on accident. They didn't like do that in an attempt to do something cool. That was actually on purpose. That's how it's supposed to look. That looked cool. However, the dialogue was kind of cheesy, just like Madam Web. Not as cheesy as Madam Web, but cheesy. And the story just went by way too fast to the point where I honestly didn't care about the villain. But I gotta admit, it was entertaining, especially when they showed like the logo for Morbius and it had like that 80s like title look. I liked it. I really liked it. I I think people hate on this movie too much. At number 4 is Venom Let There Be Carnage. So I gotta I gotta admit, I never really understood why people like this movie. And yes, I have seen reviews online. For some reason, people like this movie, and I don't know why. And if I'm being more honest, Venom Let There Be Carnage was almost below Morbius on my list due to how the story ended up. I Oh my gosh, I hated the story for Venom Let There Be Carnage. It sucked ass. Not as bad as Madam Web, but it sucked. I hate for a Venom movie, for the second movie in the Venom franchise or the Venom trilogy, it had like okay, the first one's gonna be good. This one's gonna be good too, considering it also has Carnage. Carnage is a really cool symbiote, and then it happened. And I'm like, wow, that was a sucky movie. The CGI was good for this movie, but I hated how they changed the voice for Venom. That's the first thing I didn't like. They changed it. So, and honestly, I gotta admit, I don't know why they didn't use Tony Todd for the voice of Venom. For my knowledge, I don't think they used Tony Todd for Venom. I really don't think so. Which I don't know why they didn't, but that's a separate issue. And which I have to say right now, R.I.P. Tony Todd. Rest in power. We lost him way too quick. He will definitely be missed. And then for Venom Let There Be Carnage, I hated how they made it a bromance movie. Oh my gosh, I hated that part. I saw this in theaters with some friends, and oh my god, it was so bad. Why did they make it a bromance movie? They literally made it about Venom and Eddie, quote unquote, breaking up. And I hated it. It was a bromance movie, and it wasn't even funny. Venom is an alien. This is this is not the movie where you need to have a breakup or anything. No, like I get it's all about symbiosis and stuff like that, but geez, it was terrible. I hated it with a passion. I hated that plot piece, and I think that's also why because for information, Andy Serkis directed this, and I because of how bad this movie turned out, I really don't respect Andy Serkis as a director anymore. As an actor, he's great. But as a director, he sucks. After Venom Let There Be Carnage, he's a terrible director. I'm sorry, but I'm speaking the truth. And on top of that, yeah, Venom was just he's a symbiote and it shouldn't be like that bromance. I don't know, it was just so stupid. However, Carnage was good. I really liked Carnage. I liked the CGI for Carnage. I liked him as a villain. However, I felt like the villain could have done more. Like I feel like there could have been more to that character. And Woody Harrelson playing Cletus Cassidy slash Carnage wasn't too bad. However, I think his villain arc kind of spiraled and kind of went down the drain towards the end of the movie. But other than that, I think he actually wasn't bad. Plus, Shriek, which is like Cletus Cassidy's girlfriend in the movie, was kind of an obstruction to the story, and it really was. If she was like, she was a plot point or a plot piece to the movie, but like not to the point where I'm like, hey, if you take her out, the movie's done. Like, I feel like if they took her out of the story, I think the movie actually would have been better. But overall, it's a terrible movie. I watch it more than Madam Web and Morbius, so it does have some rewatchability, but easily the worst Venom movie out of the trilogy. Easily. And then now we are actually on to the top 3. So the top 3 movies of the SSU. Now, at number 3 is Kraven the Hunter. So I know I just gave this movie a 6 out of 10, but I honestly think that this movie is better than the other 3, just due to the nature of the character and the story. I liked how gory it was, and Aaron Taylor Johnson was a good Kraven. Yes, I did say that I still stand by the statement. He was not as good as the Kraven that was in Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac on PS5. He can't touch that Kraven. He doesn't even come close to that Kraven. But with what he had to work with and what he did, Aaron Taylor Johnson was a good Kraven. And yes, I did say that the story and the plot was slow and disjointed. But these, out of the other movies, out of Madam Web, Morbius, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and Kraven the Hunter, I would watch Kraven again easily. I'm almost thinking about buying this on digital. This movie was actually not too bad, and it does have a good amount of rewatchability. I like the setting and the nature and how he hunts, and the action just definitely sold me on this movie. However, as said by some reviewers, I would not say this was as good as Venom. There's one reviewer in particular, Grace Randolph, or Rudolph? Randolph, whatever her last name is. She reviewed the movie and she actually liked it. She said it was as good as the first Venom movie. The first Venom movie doesn't even touch this movie. The first Venom movie is good. So, yeah. So I think Kraven, in my opinion, I think Kraven the Hunter deserves that number 3. I think it is one of the better ones. Not the best one, but one of the better ones. And then at number 2 is Venom, The Last Dance. This was, honestly, I gotta say, this was actually a really good movie that I enjoyed, and the first SSU movie I enjoyed since Venom 1. I liked how it introduced Null the Symbiote God, and even though he was barely in this movie, he actually was really cool. I think that was a major plus and a major pro for why I like this movie. And I think that's what the writers and the creators of this movie had in mind. I think what they did was like they were like saying, "Hey, this is gonna be the last movie in the trilogy. How can we, or in this franchise, how can we really like make this stand out?" And I think they basically said, "Hey, let's just bring everything that is symbiote related into this movie." And I think that's why the movie did so well. I really like this movie, and I can't say that enough. Null, Andy Serkis as Null was really good. Null the Symbiote God was really good. He showed how powerful he is, and even like I said, even though he was barely in it, he was really, really cool. Out of all the Venom movies, this was the most symbiote filled movie, and I just loved every minute of it. It definitely had some cheesy moments, such as Venom dancing with Mrs. Chen in Vegas, which was totally unnecessary. Venom going to Vegas in the first place also was unnecessary. That plot piece and plot point was unnecessary and didn't need to be in there, but I think they still wanted some wackiness that the Venom movies, that Venom Let There Be Carnage had, and so I think they wanted to put this on purpose. But other than that, I liked it, and the ending was actually really good too. It was heartfelt. It was definitely good. I really, really liked it. There was actually a chance I almost put Venom The Last Dance above Venom, but then I thought how good Venom was, and then I was like, nah, I'm good. So this leaves with number 1. Obviously, number 1 is Venom. By far, this is the best movie in the SSU. It established a good anti-hero story, even though Venom is a villain. Tom Hardy did a good job acting, and this was the best version of Venom. It had the best voice for Venom, and it had the best action from Venom. Plus, this was the most comic accurate Venom story by far out of the 3 movies. Seriously, it actually had stuff such as Riot and the Life Foundation, and oh my gosh, I can't think of his name, but the guy that owns Life Corporation or Life Foundation. All 3 of those are actually in the comics and are actually a Venom story from the comics. So I do appreciate that. And I think that's also why Venom is probably the best movie out there, because it's really accurate. And so that was my SSU movies ranked. To go over it again, it is number 6, Madam Web. Number 5, Morbius. Number 4, Venom Let There Be Carnage. Number 3, Kraven the Hunter. Number 2, Venom The Last Dance. And number 1, Venom. So, how did you like the SSU movies? Which ones were your favorite? Let me know by leaving a comment below on YouTube or replying to me on Twitter at DriveInChatPod. That is DriveInChatPod. Okay, and that is officially the end of the show. Don't forget to tune in on December 31st for the Drive and Chat Awards show, where I will actually be giving awards to basically the top movies and the nominated categories of 2024. So be sure to tune in on that episode on December 31st, because I will also be teasing some season 2 stuff that I have cooking in the back. So make sure you go see the Drive and Chat Awards show on December 31st. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to leave a review, follow us for the latest updates, and join us next week for some more cinematic fun. Until then, keep the popcorn popping and the reels rolling.